Hi everyone, and welcome back to Waterhouse Forde. So in this video we're continuing with the International, and today we're just going to go through the front end. That is the front axle, the steering spindles, and also we'll hope to get into the wheel bearings. That may be a different video, but we'll see how we get on and what progress we make. But to start with, we're going to jack the tractor up. We're going to make sure it's properly supported, and then we're going to check the state of the pivot bush for the front axle. That'll be the first thing. And then we're going to move on and have a look at the spindles. That's the bit at each end of the axle that the wheels turn on in order to enable them to steer. That certainly we'll cover in this video, and then if we get time, we'll do the wheel bearings as well. We'll see how we go. So yeah, hope that this is interesting to you, hope that you enjoy it, and follow along and see how we go. Okay, so we've now got the tractor supported right in the center, underneath the pivot pin. And as you can see there now, Oscar is able to move it backwards and forwards, up and down, with very little effort. So the first thing there obviously is that the pivot pin is nice and free, which is obviously highly desirable. What we're now going to do is take a look and see if we can see any unusual play in the pivot pin, and then we'll move on to the spindles, and then, no, Oscar, no. And then we'll take a look at the steering, make sure, we'll see how much play there is in the steering. And then, as I said in the intro, if we get the chance, we'll get to the wheel bearings. Okay, I'm under the tractor now, and we're just going to test this pivot bush. I've got a crowbar here. First thing we want to look for is whether there's any movement in this bush itself. So we're going to put a crowbar in there, and just gently lever and see if we get any movement. Now I can't feel any movement there whatsoever, so that seems fine. The next thing we want to do is see whether we've got any lateral movement. So we put the crowbar back here. Hang on, let me just turn it around. I'm trying to do this with the camera in one hand and the crowbar in the other. So we're going to lever. Okay. So you can see we've got a little bit of lateral movement there. Okay, so that's, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 millimeters of lateral movement. That's, because I'd prefer it if it wasn't there, but it's not terribly bad. Now, the other thing I noticed is this bolt here doesn't look original. This looks like somebody's put a replacement bolt in there at some point. There's not much we can do about it really, but it seems to be okay. It's not loose, and it seems to be holding, so we'll leave that for now. But the good thing is that we've got plenty of side-to-side movement on that axle, on that pivot bush, and other than that, a little bit of lateral movement, that actually seems fine, so I'm happy with that. We'll obviously grease it up a bit. Well, hang on, do that again, Oscar. Okay, so we've got a little bit of sideways movement there. Let me hold the camera as straight as possible. Now, hopefully you can see there is a bit of movement there. More than I'd like, actually, now that I see it. Okay. Actually, looking at it, I've been looking at it in the camera, looking at it with a naked eye, It's probably only about 1 or 2 millimeters. So
you're turning the steering.
So I think that bush will need doing at some point. It's okay for now, but it's not going to be long now, and that bush will need doing. So that movement in the bush, that's what we're witnessing there. You can see how that axle is running backwards and forwards. And at this angle, that actually seems much worse than at the other, when you're underneath there. Okay, now we want to move on to the spindles. Now the spindle is this here. Okay, so we've got a tube inside here. This is a tube, and running through that we've got obviously a stub axle, which connects to the wheel, and obviously connects to the steering here as well. Now what we now need to do is see if we can see any lateral movement in there, because there'll be a bush, probably a bush there and a bearing there, and we need to see whether we've got any unusual play in those. Okay, so first thing we want to do is see whether we can get any upwards and downwards movement on the spindle. It doesn't look like it, so that looks to be quite firm. So that's okay. The next thing we want to do is check whether we've got any sideways movement, like on that axle, on the main axle. I'm not quite sure how to do that, other than perhaps on here. We've got some very small amount on there, but it's not bad. Right, now, Oscar, can you try to turn the steering?
Okay.
I want you just to put pressure on it. I'm going to resist you.
Okay.
Okay?
There isn't much resistance.
Okay, this side looks okay. Right, turn it all the way the other way. No, that way. Right, let's check this side. Okay, start turning back. Some more. Okay, hold it there.
It's moving slightly here, but...
Yeah. Okay, okay, put it straight again. Whoa. Right. So that looks okay. We'll try and see if we've got any... We'll now see if we've got any up and down movement on this one. There's a little bit of movement inside this bush here. Okay. It's not bad, but there is definitely a little bit of play inside the spindle. Definitely more than the other side. But again, it's probably only about 0.5 millimeter of movement. That sideways movement. It's maybe, well, certainly more than you want, but it's not bad. One thing I noticed when we were jacking up the tractor is that this part, this sub-axle, is moving inside the main axle. You see this bolt moving? Now this should be tight, as in it should not be able to move like that. And we've got two bolts. These bolts should be clamping that pipe, and this bolt obviously goes through the corresponding hole there, and that should be holding it reasonably tight as well. So we're going to see if we can tighten those up. Okay, those are now all three nice and tight. Right, straighten the steering for me please, Oscar. Okay, hold it there. Right, now let's see if we've got any more. We shouldn't have any movement in here now. So the only movement we got now is in that bush, which is great. It's quite a big improvement over where it was. Okay, so look, I think in summary we've got a little bit of play in that pivot bush. We've managed to tighten up this connection here, this joint, where that's basically for the sliding axle, that's for extending the axle. And in this spindle here, on what's effectively the left-hand side when you're sitting in the seat, we've got a little bit of play, especially at the top there. So, but none of it is dramatic, none of it is serious enough to need immediate attention. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this down as jobs to do next winter when the tractor is out of service, basically finish this season, and then we'll make a note to do both the spindles and the pivot bush. Well, listen, I think I'm going to leave it there for this video for today. Hopefully that's shown you a little bit about what to check and what to look for. It's worth doing these checks every few years. I don't think it's something you have to do every year, assuming that you are following a good routine of greasing everything every year. Sorry, not every year. If you're greasing every few weeks, then these things should last more than 2 years. So if you check them every other year, then that should be adequate. In the next video, I think what we'll do is we'll strip the front hubs and check those wheel bearings. Again, I'm pretty confident that those are okay. The only thing I want to do there is basically to repack the bearings with fresh grease. Because we have to ford a river to get to the paddock, it's almost inevitable that those bearings will get some water in them, and it's worth pretty much once a year just opening them out, cleaning them up, and putting fresh grease in. I try to keep the hubs packed with grease and full. As I say, I tend to grease every 2 weeks, and that obviously helps because it obviously forces some of the old grease and hopefully the water out each time, and make sure that we've always got fresh grease in there. And of course, if it's full, then less water can actually get in. But anyway, so look, I think that's it for today. Hopefully you'll join us for the next video where we go through the hubs. They're not complicated and not difficult to do, so that should be a relatively straightforward video. Some of the other things that I want to check, and this is a much bigger job, is I do want to take the rear wheels off the tractor and take a look at the brakes. And for that, we're going to run through the article that's been written by Andrew Chapman which you can find on the Anglo Agriparts website, where he's written an article with lots of very good photos and lots of very good narrative about how the brakes work, and indeed how he went about restoring the brakes on his International. So our plan to work through his article as we go through the brakes on this tractor, and that will be coming up in a video soon. So listen, I hope you all have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you all on the next video, which will be the wheel hubs, the front wheel hubs. Cheers for now.